Hello everyone. Today I'm going to do an overview of Dwarven Forge adventures and where you can get them. This is a topic that I covered on my blog, but I'm going to go into it in a little bit more of detail and walk you through it so it's really easy for you to find those adventures and see what you can do with them and what they look like. Give you a peek into it in a way that I can't quite do on my blog. So let's take a look at what we've got. Hi, everybody. So you can see here on the right side, you can see my website. This is alphastream.org. And the latest article, so if you're at the homepage, you'll see everything and all the various articles you can look at. We're going to drill down into this article very quickly to just show off what we've got. And you can build amazing things with Dwarven Forge. If you don't know what that is, it's 3D terrain. Really nice. It's basically top of the line terrain. This is not something you paint unless you want to. They often do have an unpainted version, but it is something that you buy and put together, all these little pieces to make these amazing dioramas like you see in this picture here or in the one right below my face. So I love terrain, I love miniatures, and I put together the first one's going to be a couple of blog posts looking into what you can do with Dwarven Forge. And today, we're going to look at where you can get the free adventures, which is covered in the blog, but let's take a look at it in more detail. There are several things that are free, and I walk through them here. And by the way, what my blog does, which is kind of interesting, hopefully, for you, is it looks at how you can use the main three adventures, Dungeon of Doom, Caverns Deep, and Wildlands, in your published adventures that already exist from D&D 5th edition. So you can, for example, put it into Lost Mine of Phandelver, or Dragons of Icespire Peak, or Rise of Tiamat. And so I make recommendations on which ones work particularly well and some of the examples of where you could put them into all these various adventures. All right, so that's hopefully helpful, but let's look at where you can get them, walk you through this, and show you what you have to gain. So I'm going to open this in a new tab, and so you can follow that link directly, but if you aren't on my website, you can just go to dwarvenforge.com, and then from this menu, it's a little bit sort of not obvious, but you've got their store, all kinds of different places you can go to, and under galleries, you will find a number of things from builds, videos, but also what's called modules. And when you click on that, you get to this page where we are already, modules and more. All right, so this will have all of the free downloads that you can have. And you might say, why are there free things here? That's a great question. It's because when they launch these enormous Kickstarters that Dwarven Forge does, they will often say, okay, if we hit some stretch goal level, there will be free adventures. And I've been fortunate enough to be a part of that, having helped to write a number of these, though not everything here. And none of this is something that I just did by myself. It's something that I was hired to do by the team, and I got to work with the Dwarven Forge team to do. Very cool stuff. So we can scroll down and you can see here they sort of have latest at the top. So Wildlands is their most recent Kickstarter that was all about terrain for the outdoors, mountains, swamps, forests. Caverns Deep, which went into, as you might expect, cavern-like places underground. The Dungeon of Doom, which is a trap-filled dungeon full of surprises and traps and tricks. And then they have additional documents. This is a sort of very funny document. We'll walk through it, but a funny document that talks about sort of traps. There is a guidebook to the city of Valoria, which the owner of Dwarven Forge, the founder of Dwarven Forge, has played extensively in this city of Valoria, and so this all pulls all that information together. And then you have a couple of different encounters that were created as sort of one-shot encounters. So let's just choose one of those encounters so you get a feel for what those are. This is really kind of short, bite-sized things that you can put to use, and these are not actually in PDF form. They are in the website itself, so you get an example of how to set things up and sort of overhead view of the terrain. And this is the kind of thing that you may say, well, I don't have any Dwarven Forge terrain. And that's fine. Dwarven Forge terrain is super expensive because it's super cool. But you don't need it to make use of all the content that's on this website. You can just draw this out on a battle map with a marker, or on paper, or use old dungeon tiles that existed in D&D 4th edition, or anything you like to just recreate this. Or run it theater of the mind, but use this as your map that you reference just like you would normally in an adventure. So this is an example of sort of a short encounter that they make available on the website. In this case, it's sort of a bard-themed encounter, and it has a puzzle that I won't spoil by going too fast, but or I'll go quickly so I don't spoil it. But how you get the treasure will have to do with a puzzle that plays off of notes. It's very bard-themed. And then they show you what it takes to make that if you want to actually buy it, which is pretty cool. And there are several of these other short adventures. Kobold Cave, Harbinger's Hideout. There is the City Guidebook. This is an unbelievably huge document. And if you look at this, you'll see this sort of on all their web pages. There will be a web version, which is sort of a light PDF. And then there will be a very big file, 163 megabyte file full of all art and everything. So if you were going to print this out, it would be, that kind of quality. Sometimes you have additional things like these are maps that you can take a look at. So you can, download the map of the city and look at all the details if you want to do that. We'll look very quickly at the city of Valoria. I was in here not too long ago taking a look at it. But if we start at the top, you can see everything that is involved here. And it's illustrated, it has all kinds of information on the city itself, just tons and tons of stuff that you can use off of that. So that is the city of Valoria. Doom's Compendium of Pain is very funny. It's written from the perspective of a familiar that the wizard in the Dungeon of Doom has, and he's called Doom. And so Doom is an imp, and this is sort of a, if a chaotic evil imp was writing a guide to making player characters suffer, this is exactly what this is. And it has a number of traps and ideas that do have statistics to them, but easily can be altered. The kind of biggest piece here is just the creativity around all kinds of things, like a bug pit or magnetic spider webs, which are things you can actually buy. But what if you had spider webs that stretch across a cavern? How would that work? So some really fun ideas here. If you're ever looking for trap ideas, this is a neat way to do it. And they're not just traditional traps. They include all kinds of really interesting things like thorn walls and obstacles, a runic column, a lot of different Eldritch Eye, a lot of different ideas here that are all available. So that is Doom's Compendium of Pain. And now we get into really the three big adventures that exist. The first one that was created was Dungeon of Doom. And Dungeon of Doom is an enormous labyrinth. We can take a look at this here, and you will see that there's a lot of support for Dungeon of Doom. You can watch videos of all kinds of different groups that played through it, and I think one of them was even done over radio or as a podcast, so sort of a radio type play where you just listen to it, and then there are a number that are video that you can look at. And Dungeon of Doom consists of 15 different encounters, and the same is true of the next one, Caverns Deep. And if we look at the web version of this document, it's still a fairly big file, really beautiful art, and the way that this free adventure is put together is really cool. Great visuals, and sort of shows you on the map. We talked about the city of Valoria before, which is over here to the corner there. And you can see this is where the Dungeon of Doom is found. And it is a big sprawling complex. So this shows you the first 12 encounters and how they are laid out. And then the last few, which tend to be really big encounters. And these encounters just, one of the things that I've loved working on this, being the primary author and working off of the ideas that the team had come up with, is that each one offers very different interactions. So for example, number 8 is a puzzle where the floor is set up with tile pieces. And you might think, well, okay, then I've got to buy that terrain, but you actually don't. When this Kickstarter came out, I purchased myself a couple of these rooms, and then I had some older Dwarven Forge sets, and I used just those sets that I owned to make every single room in Dungeon of Doom. And it was really close enough. So for example, I did not have green acid floors for this, So I just got green construction paper and put it under some elevated bridge-like formations. Even though I didn't own this room, I was able to approximate pretty well. The puzzle tiles room, I was able to use Scrabble words. And then I drew out some runes for the ones that were sort of more symbols rather than letters. And that was a lot of fun to use. So there are always ways you can mimic these, and really even you can run them theater of the mind, as one group did, that you can listen to on the podcast recording. But it is fun to behold. Even if you're going to run this theater of the mind, you can use the inspiration of the visuals to have something to describe to players. The 15 encounters, as I said, they vary in theme, they vary in size, and in terms of with the kinds of things that are happening. Sometimes there are tricks. So like when number one is sort of role playing, but then you come in here and there's this trap-filled corridor and a door. The door talks to you, which creates role-playing opportunities, even though there's traps involved. And basically, you're going to be directed to go down here, solve a puzzle in these rooms, and come back to this room for yet some more tricks and traps as you work to solve room 2. So they don't necessarily always go just in order. The experience is richer than that. The other thing you can do when you're reading through this document and looking for inspiration, it's really easy to just take one room and use it. There are a number of, this puzzle room, for example, with the puzzle tile floors, is a really fun thing that you could put into any dungeon that's guarding some sort of treasure. Or this very large encounter, which has a sort of gorgon and some statues that animate. Super neat to just put into any room and give it a story that fits into what you're doing. The same thing is true of eldritch pools. There are these sort of pools that you have to go through and doors you have to go through that will split the party up deliberately. Never split the party. It's going to split the party, and it'll force the party into different groups, and then some of them will move on to this final one. And so sort of how you tag team in and out and how you handle the dividing is what will create the kind of neat experience when you are going through this. There is a sort of bug warren, which all these insects have broken into the Dungeon of Doom, and that creates its own neat experience here that connects to 2 different areas. Room 13, it's not just a room. This encounter is sort of like 3 encounters put together. There's sort of this antechamber that you have to deal with some traps and figure out what's going on here. You can talk to bridge guardians. There are some really scary things that come after you when you are heading over the bridge. In fact, I think that if I show you this art is taken from when I ran this for my group. And I did not own this room. I did have some pieces, so I had the bridge, but I did not have the entirety of the encounter, and I was able to build it out of the other pieces I owned. And then I used this for the dragon figure. It's a sort of dragon-like creature. And then you have this central area with all this lava or fire down below, and then you have another area here once you're able to get the keys and move across here. When you do everything that is in the Dungeon of Doom, you get to the final 3 encounters, which are all part of number 15, and those take you through very serpent-themed encounters with a number of surprises before you meet the goddess Sisul. And that is just a really fun encounter with a very strong boss that's going to be a neat test for the party. So I think this is a great adventure. I mean, I'm biased because I helped work on it, but I really do think it's a lot of fun. I've run this for my own home group. I love what the team did. I handed it in on a very plain-looking Microsoft Word document, and the team turned it into this really neat, nicely formatted adventure. And this is enormous. It's 389 pages long. So there's a lot here because you have new monsters, new magic items, and sort of changed magic items. Like they might be something that's an OGL magic item, open gaming license, but then it has a little extra benefit to it. And each of the rooms has a full map. So again, you don't need the terrain to know what this should look like, or if you do have the terrain, then you know how to put it together. There is also a separate document that is a build guide. So if you ever need to know how to build the room and you have the pieces, that separate document will teach you that. But everything's set up here. It tells you, where the crossbow trap is and the exit and Zoltar's game table, all these kinds of components. And the neat thing is, this adventure is for levels 1 to 10, and a lot of times what that means is, you're going to start at 1, you're going to end at 10. But here what it means is you can be any of those levels, and it will tell you how to use it. And it does this in two ways. My friend Mike Shea, Sly Flourish, he likes to he and I like to discuss this approach a lot, because it's interesting, right? In order to make this happen, not only do you have monster tables, which if you were at level 1, well, there's going to be one of these Maragasts that's a cleric and one that's a warrior. But if you're running it at level 8, then it's a Maragast Doomwalker cleric, 2 Maragast Doomwalker warriors, and a Maragast cleric. So the experience is slightly different depending on the level of the characters. And Mike will often say, well, what is the truth? And I say, well, this is all a made-up game. There is no truth. It's the experience that the characters are going through. But yeah, so you may differ as to how you like this. But what's cool is you can shape this to anything from levels 1 to 10, and even the DCs scale. So detecting the crossbow trap will vary depending on what tier of play you are, and that is explained in the earlier part of the document. Really cool art. It's all shot from the perspective of being the miniatures, basically running through and experiencing all of this. And so each of these encounters will be detailed, and there are a number in here that are my favorites. If you ever want to do just a trap that is, a trap-filled corridor type thing, then I'm going to go up here to the index, and I'm going to go to what's called the Gauntlet. And the Gauntlet is basically a trap-filled corridor where you are trying to get to the very end and pick up this special item, this artifact that's at the end. There are these glyph stones that serve as both artifacts, ways for the characters to refresh when they're not able to rest inside the Dungeon of Doom, and offer neat power. And so all of these areas have multiple traps, and you can see them here all listed. So, spoilers. But this, if you ever want to just throw this kind of experience at players, take a look at the Gauntlet, and I think you will greatly enjoy the way it works. When I ran this for my group, I'm going to be talking about this aspect as well, but I put the Dungeon of Doom into the Tomb of Annihilation 5th edition adventure. And this was one of my favorite memories of how they would reach every section in this hallway and sort of think about what to do. Okay, there's this clear spike pit trap, what do we do? And they had sort of the equivalent of a robe of many items, but it had sort of special Cholt themed things, including like canoes. And so 2 of the canoes were used here to sort of create bridges because they were so worried about somehow we were going to end up in the pit. And of course, they ended up in the pit. All of them, even those who thought they were very safe. So there's a lot of role playing here too, as much as you might think, this is sort of Tomb of Horror-ish. It's a bigger experience than that, and there are a lot of different creatures to talk to. So gargoyles will talk to you, and there's someone who's chained up and a dog to interact with, and a lot of very interesting interactions that take place that make this a lot of fun. So you can see here the trap-filled corridor and what it looks like. So yeah, this is an enormous, huge encounter. I could go through all of these encounters, and I think I probably will to some extent talk about the design of them, because I'm really fond of what we did together on this project. It was a ton of fun to do all of this. And as you get later on in this document, if I go towards the end, you will get to all kinds of things like puzzle solutions. You will get to handouts for the magic items, so you can print these and cut them up and give them to your players. There's some really neat special glyph stones and what all of those do. And there are monsters, so we can, and you can see this like a tablet. It's unbelievable the kind of level of art and care that the team puts into the adventure's creation. So really neat. Even the things that NPCs will sometimes say to you become a really beautiful handout. This is a variation on a Wand of Wonder. It's just really fun, and torn parchment, torn map, putting it together. Some really neat ideas here. And then you have all the different maps here. And let me see in the table of contents, I think we can find. Yeah, so you have your maps, build guides, so they are in this document. And then guides to what the ruins look like. You even have an appendix with Pathfinder information. Oh, and the new monsters. So there are a number of different monsters that appear here. So all their 5th edition statistics and later their Pathfinder statistics appear for everything that's a new creature. There's some pretty fun things. The Maragast, I think, work really well. The 2-headed giant crocodile has an interesting surprise story. This functions as a creature, but is basically a type of trap, the serpent brazier. And I am particularly fond of the dragon that we created together. There are a lot of monsters. The Abyssal Vermilion. This is what the miniature actually looks like instead of the picture that I had earlier. But this sort of red dragon offspring, it is really has a lot of neat tricks that it can do to surprise your players. So, all right, no more spoilers. So that is the Dungeon of Doom. 389 or so pages, all super cool, all free. Caverns Deep, let's go into that. It is also 15 rooms in terms of its length. And here, what this adventure aims to do is to create a situation where you are in a cavern and you were brought into this without much clarity of what is taking place. And you soon realize that you are caught in a hag's plans. The story that Nate Taylor from Dwarven Forge put together is again kind of pulled together with really amazing art. And you can see different parts of the complex and the dungeon layout. It's really neat to look at and read. There's some great pieces here, some great concepts behind the story that I got to work with. Really neat enemies and characters like this Skis Risa, the lizard folk queen. She's really neat. The adventure walks you through everything that's taking place, but again, you don't have to run this as a mega adventure if you don't want to. You can just take individual pieces of it or even sections of it. Both of these adventures work particularly well where you can just take like 2 or 3 linked rooms and drop them in, and that can be the entirety of the experience. You could just take a couple of the rooms that have the hag featured in it, and that could be it. So there are a number of different neat rooms in here. A summoning chamber that you start in. There is a prison passage, which has a prisoner named after Matt Mercer. That's kind of fun. I didn't do that. I just played with it. That's Mercer right there. There is the Bestial Cliff. And I should say that this adventure I co-wrote with Will Doyle. He wrote roughly half the encounters. And so this is one of his with a minotaur and a pit of bubbling mud. And he has some really neat ideas for what takes place in this location. This twisted minotaur, very cool. The Webbed Lair, I had a lot of fun with this one, where there is a sort of strange spider base. And when you show up, there are some creatures that are dropping off a captive that's struggling. So it's one of those, like, what do? Do you just watch and see what happens? Do you interact and jump in? And when you do so, or kind of depending on how you do so, then that'll change how the encounter plays out. And you may learn more or less about the story of this twisted spider creature and what it is. And there's a very interesting story behind it. As well as these Yorgrim, who are these sort of Nordic-inspired creatures that are in this area, and the story of why they're there, what happened to their king, that'll all play out over time. Old Dwarven ruins and the story behind them. And one of the things that's neat about this is the Dwarven Forge team had the ideas of many different peoples having been in these caverns. And so we worked together, Will and I, to create that story around how these different groups had interacted over time and how it had led to the current events where now this hag has taken over. There is a Dwarven Forge in the Covert War Camp. That's kind of fun. You meet the Yorgrim here and can interact with them. Maybe war, maybe peace. And this is just the first half of the adventure. There's 2 files here, so this first half, and you see they're different. As before, there are new monsters with neat ideas. And Yorgrim, the Sinhild the Spider Beast. So all kinds of different pieces. And then again, handouts with all the neat, so, what does the clan symbol look like? and the sacrificial bowl, which is really neat, right? I just absolutely love the art here. There are special magic items, so all of these different pieces can lend to the experience, and you can use them in whatever you're doing, right? You're going to give out a ring of warmth to your party. You can just use the handout from Caverns Deep, and use these as the treasures to give out in your next adventures. And people will be like, "Where'd you get those amazing handouts from?" Yeah, a lot of fun. And I have a number of encounters in this adventure that I particularly love. Let's see, is there an overview? I don't know if there is, but let's take a look at one of the easy ways to get an overview is to actually look at Dwarven Forge's Kickstarters. So if you, for example, go to the Caverns Deep Kickstarter page and you look at the campaign tab, you can get to videos walking you through every single encounter, lots of art that shows what they look like. And also there'll be some documents that'll provide an overview of all the different locations that are involved. So here it is. So you can see here the different, summoning chamber, web layer, and so on. And of all these different rooms, there are a number that I really, really enjoy. This bridge over this gorge where this river's rushing through is a lot of fun. And then if you happen to go to this side, there are some pirates that have sort of locked themselves away here, trying to survive and escape the notice of the hag. And they will initially think that the party is, going to take them out, that they're probably in league with the hag. But there's something in there that surprises both sides so that you have common cause to work together. And that's kind of a fun encounter. The shrine of Skisrasa, the lizard queen, that's a really fun adventure where she's sort of in the middle of this blood ritual when you walk in. So how that plays out is interesting. This room 7 is an enormous mushroom grotto, and I'm sure there's some pictures here. If I go up to the, let's see if encounter graphics is still up. So you can see that there's so much here to support these adventures, which is fun. So you can see the mushroom grotto and what it looks like. And so how you move, where you choose to move, probably around the edges to try to skirt this enormous mushroom and how it activates. That's a lot of fun that makes the encounter really interesting. But there are a number of really, really fun encounters. This 14, there's like a Sicilian sludge that ties into the previous Dungeon of Doom adventure. And there are floating earth moats that you move around in. So those are that's a really fun encounter. Will Doyle created some really neat. This Crystal Caverns is really fun and sort of has a callback to an old classic adventure. This is the Underdoom here with floating earth moats that you kind of leap across and face off against the hag. Some real epic play there. All right, so that is all the Caverns Deep adventure. So the last adventure and most recent is called Wildlands. And Wildlands is, as I said before, sort of 3 themed areas: forests, swamps, and mountains. And the first set that's out are 2 adventure series for the forest areas. And these adventures, one was written by Ellie Alexander, who's on the Dwarven Forge team. And then I wrote another series. And these are for 3rd level players and for 5th level players. So you could really run them together because it's not, you'd probably gain 2 levels here. So by the time you get to this, you could reach 5th. So you can really run them in order or as separate experiences. And each of these is a set of 5 encounters. You can see 5 encounters here, 5 encounters there. And all featuring forest encounters. So you can run them as a series, and it tells a story. Like mine is a sort of, what is this sage looking into? What is this? What's being done to these ancient elven sites that are within the forest, or the Dread Hollow Forest? And then finally stopping that threat once you've uncovered it. But you can take any of these encounters and they can serve as fun, quick pieces that are just plays, whether you want to do it as a one-shot or it's something you're throwing into a campaign. And they're all hyperlinked, so we can go to. I know mine better, but you can see they're pretty simple layouts, often initially at least, because this Kickstarter often had what's called scatter terrain. So you have individual pieces that you plunk down just on a map, and very easily then create a fun encounter without a whole huge build. As these encounters progress, the terrain is also getting more complex. You see, this is still fairly simple, so it's very easy to run these in Theater of the Mind. And so you get everything. You get set up, the hooks, how the players proceed and get to this location. In fact, there are encounters that take place before you arrive at this place, both role-playing and investigative encounters before you get to these places. But the heart of the encounter, or the how to of this encounter experience, will be a combat situation, though the other pillars are certainly woven in. So you can see here it gets to a little larger area, and it uses sort of this idea of a central ancient elven ruin that you can manipulate. And then you get into this real, more interesting forest, deeper forest. But again, you don't need all the terrain. It's awesome to have it, but you can just run this Theater of the Mind as well. And at the very end, you get into the final encounter, where there is a raging river to cross and a threat to deal with that rises above you on this big rock pillar. There are, again, custom monsters that you can use, supporting both of the adventures. And then you have handouts based on magic that you find and interesting items that you come across. So that is Wildlands, and that is everything that we have on this page. So I hope this has been helpful, that you have been able to see some of what is out here for free. I mean, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages worth of cool modules, cool adventures that you can use. Wildlands, Caverns Deep, Dungeon of Doom, and then these other additional pieces that you can use. So all available on dwarvenforge.com. I'm sharing this video for a couple reasons. I love Dwarven Forge. I'm very proud of the work that I did in these adventures and the work that the other people on the team did. So I really want to see more people make use of it. In fact, on Twitter, Andy Demps was talking about, how many people, sort of asking how many people really know of this, and wouldn't it be cool if these were actually available in like a printed hardback book, the way that you kind of see in these images. So I don't know everything. I'm not a Dwarven Forge employee. I don't know what's planned, but this sure looks like a book. And yeah, I like Andy, I would love to see this 3, 2, 1 that you can see on the spine. I would love to see all those be a collection of hardbound books someday. I don't know if they will, but I do hope that you can go to this page, grab these free adventures, and put them to use. If you have any questions about the adventures, and if you have topics that you want me to cover in the future, please let me know. You can go to my website, and you can go to the contact section and send me an email, and I will respond. I usually devote one day a week where I'll take a look at what people have sent to me and reach back. So I will definitely answer you. The other thing is that if you like the work I do, you can click on the support my work area over here to the left, and you can support me through Ko-fi or Patreon, and you'll get a whole bunch of free stuff for doing it. My tool that I use, which is detailed in a separate video for how to manage your encounters and give out magic items and all of that, create monsters, all of that is in this Excel tool that I use and provide to you. And then the rules for collaborative campaign creation and the Game Master's Guide to Evolving Magic Items are both given out to anybody who supports me on Patreon or Ko-fi as a membership. It's very easy to do. You just click on these links and sign up, and with your support, I'm able to make these videos. I'm able to create products like the ones below, and greatly appreciate it. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate the community, and I look forward to talking to you soon.